Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of respiration. This is going to focus on the chemical reaction component of it. And this is a difficult topic, so please, if you're struggling with this concept or these ideas, you need to bring it to your teacher's attention. We'll start right off with the name of the process here. This is the chemical process of releasing energy from the food you consume. It doesn't matter if you're a human or if you're a chipmunk or a worm or if you're a tree. They all do this process in some way, shape, or form. There are three main steps to extracting energy from molecules. And these steps are outlined in the two videos that are linked in your notes. You can feel free to watch those as well to try and help you solidify the concept. First off, you need to know what the energy molecule is that we're looking at. You need to know that ATP is the energy currency that cells use to power the metabolism of all organisms. This is across the board. It doesn't matter what type of organism you are, you use adenosine triphosphate as an energy molecule. This molecule is made up of an adenosine molecule that has three phosphates linked to it, and each additional phosphate is an increased amount of energy. So adenosine monophosphate, adenosine diphosphate, and adenosine triphosphate, which is the highest energy of them. I'll show you actually visually what this looks like. So this is adenosine triphosphate. Each bond holds energy in this molecule. So the more phosphates you put in, the more energy the molecule as a whole stores. Whenever you break a bond, if you splice that phosphate off of there, the breaking of a bond releases energy. So your molecule, or excuse me, your cells can utilize ATP to run different processes by taking the energy from this bond, releasing it, powering some sort of process, and all of this is recyclable because you can take ADP, which has two phosphates, and you can add the phosphate back in a cellular process to generate the high energy molecule. So this is completely reversible. So that makes this molecule very functional in storing energy and allowing it to be used elsewhere. So where does the energy come from to make ATP out of ADP? So ADP can be converted into ATP by adding energy. So the question is, where does the energy come from? And the answer is generally glucose, right? But it can be any of a multitude of different energy sources. It can be carbohydrates, it can be lipids, it can be proteins. All right, so ATP, when the energy bond is broken, it releases that energy to power cellular activities. ATP is now converted into ADP, which has a lower energy and is recycled or reused. How many ATP can we generate? Well, your body needs lots and lots of them. One glucose molecule has the potential to generate 36 ATP because glucose is a high energy molecule. All right, a glucose molecule, actually if I bring you back over here, right, one glucose molecule has lots of bonds in between these carbon atoms. And by breaking these bonds, we can release energy. Again, that is a physical process that exists in nature. When you break a bond, it releases energy. When you form a bond, it requires energy. So by breaking the bonds slowly through this glucose molecule in a gradual process, we can harness the energy and create ATP. And so slowly breaking down that glucose, which is C6H12O6, we're going to convert that into carbon dioxide and water molecules. All right, a whole bunch of them. And you're going to end up with a bunch of ATP generated from it. You're going to get 36 of them. What we're learning about today is what are the processes that allow this to happen. All right, what are these processes? All right, so there are two main processes that occur here because not every organism lives in the same environment, and realistically, you're not always going to have the same materials available. Aerobic respiration is using oxygen to help break down that glucose molecule. Anaerobic means without oxygen. And I'm certain you've heard those terms before, but now we're putting a meaning behind it that relates to energy production. Here's your glucose molecule, C6H12O6. The first action in order to generate the energy that is harnessed by the ATP, or to collect that energy, is you've got to split it in half. This process is called glycolysis, and it happens in the cytoplasm of all cells in the body. Every single cell needs to generate its ATP needed. Some cells need more than others, but every cell has the ability to split glucose in the cytoplasm into 3 carbon molecules. These 3 carbon molecules are known as pyruvic acid. This first process actually generates a small amount of energy in and of itself. If we look over here, what we see is that 6-carbon glucose is split during glycolysis, and it's split into 2 3-carbon pyruvate molecules. Each one of these will be on its own broken down further in the following sequences. But remember, in order to break bonds, it takes energy. So even to start this process in action, I need to utilize 2 ATP molecules to break those bonds. To split it, I need energy. And as they say, it takes money to make money. You need ATP to start this process. Once you split it, though, you can start a whole series of different chemical reactions. All right, so here are your options. All right, you have anaerobic options right here. All right, or you have aerobic options. The 2 varieties on the left side of this diagram show the ways you can generate energy without oxygen. There are 2. There's alcohol fermentation or lactic acid fermentation. Both of them will proceed without oxygen. Alcohol fermentation happens with yeast. This is used to make alcoholic beverages like beer or wine. And then there's lactic acid fermentation that is actually also used to make yogurt and cheese. Right? So bacteria are doing this process and we capitalize on it. Yeast is doing this process, alcohol fermentation, and we capitalize on that too. Right? But both of these processes, alcohol fermentation and lactic acid fermentation, the total output is very low. You stop this process at the alcohol and carbon dioxide phase or lactic acid and carbon dioxide phase, you only get a net gain of 2 ATP. It took 2 to start it. I'll get 2 from each pyruvate that I generate. So I split it into pyruvic acid, and the pyruvic acid is turned into alcohol, I get 2 ATP. The second one is turned into alcohol, I get 2 ATP. That's a total of 4 ATP, but it cost me 2 to start, so I'm only going to have a net gain of 2. These are not efficient processes, but they do generate ATP. The real money is with aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen and a couple of other very elaborate processes known as the Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle. All right, you need water and a whole lot of different enzymes to be able to do this, and oxygen. You also need an electron transport chain, which is a series of chemical reactions that only occurs in the mitochondria, which is why we call the mitochondria, I dare I even say it, the powerhouse of the cell. It is the site of cellular respiration. And when you do the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, you generate much more ATP, and the total output for all of it is a net gain of not 32 here because you got a couple more up here. It's a net gain of 36 ATP. So here are the steps. First thing you got to do is you got to do glycolysis. You get a net gain of 2 ATP doing that. Now, if you're a yeast or if you're a bacteria, you can do anaerobic respiration, and that's going to be fermenting. It's going to be either alcohol if you're a yeast, or it's going to be lactic acid fermentation if you're a bacteria. Either way, you only get a net gain of 2 ATP. But if I'm running a sprint and I'm running as fast as I possibly can, my muscle cells will burn through my ATP so fast I can't generate enough of it quickly. So my body will go into a form of anaerobic respiration where my mitochondria aren't involved. All right, they can't get enough ATP generated fast enough. Again, this is in sprinting or high energy demand activities. And these are the activities that generate muscle cramps and that burning sensation in your muscles, because the carbon dioxide being generated and the lactic acid that is generated causes a burning sensation due to the acidic conditions that are generated in the muscles. However, in aerobic respiration, when you have plenty of oxygen available, a whole bunch of other processes occur. You still start with glycolysis, and that's going to generate 2 ATP. But those 2 pyruvate molecules are going to be converted and transferred to the mitochondria, and it's going to be converted into acetyl-CoA. Now, acetyl-CoA is still a 3-carbon compound, but that is the start of the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is going to generate 2 ATP So that's going to give us a total of 4 now. And in addition to that, it's going to create a couple of other interesting energy carrying molecules called NADH and FADH2. All right. These I'll show you in just a few minutes. All right. Now, the oxygen isn't actually used until now. Those ATP, those are free to go do whatever job they got to do. But we have to create ATP from the energy carriers that I just mentioned, the NADH and the FADH2. Those go into the electron transport chain and are converted into ATP as well. When oxygen levels drop in our bodies, we switch to anaerobic respiration. I mentioned that. And when glucose isn't present, our bodies and our cells will burn fats and proteins, and those will be shuttled into the electron transport chain as well. All right, so here is the chemical reaction shown in molecules. You need 6 carbon dioxides and 6 water molecules in photosynthesis to be able to make sugar, and a plant will release 6 oxygens in doing that. But cellular respiration is like the exact opposite. It's like pushing this in reverse. So a plant will make sugars to store that energy, but then when it wants to use the energy, the plant will take the sugar, run it in reverse, and do cellular respiration, generating 36 ATP, just like humans, your dog, a cat, a worm. All of them do the same thing, the same chemical process to convert sugars into ATP. So here's what this looks like in a nutshell. Here's the glycolysis procedure right here. You got 2 ATP to start it off. It takes 2 ATP to begin it. That's going to generate 2 ATP, and it's going to generate 2 NADHs. All right, now these are those high energy molecules that I mentioned before. These are going to create ATP only when they go into the electron transport chain. So this notice right here, this note right here, NADH, that will go into the electron transport chain and it'll give us 4 ATP. The 2 NADHs that are generated in pyruvate converting into acetyl-CoA, it gets us 2 NADHs. That, when it goes into the electron transport chain, will get us a few more ATP. Then we go into the Krebs cycle. During the Krebs cycle, or citric acid cycle, acetyl-CoA is slowly broken down by a series of enzymes where those 3 carbons are slowly cleaved off or cut off little by little, producing carbon dioxide in the process. It's going to create a whole bunch of these energy molecules. They all go to the electron transport chain to convert NADH or FADH2 into ATP. If you sum up all the ATP that you can generate from the energy carriers as well as the ATP, that's where we get that 36 number for the amount of ATP produced by this process. All right, so the process can take 2 different roads. You can do an anaerobic or aerobic. You should know the difference between them. You should definitely know that anaerobic respiration is less efficient than aerobic respiration. You only get 2 ATP formed from these, and you'll get 36 ATP produced if you have oxygen available and the cells have mitochondria. The reason why yeast and bacteria don't do aerobic respiration is because they don't have mitochondria. The electron transport chain and the citric acid cycle take place inside of the mitochondria. So here's glycolysis. All those energy carriers, the NADHs and the FADH2s, they go into this yellow structure that would be the mitochondria. The citric acid cycle breaks them down. The electron transport chain converts that energy into ATP. So there's our 2 ATP from glycolysis. You get 2 ATP from the citric acid cycle. All the rest is generated by the chemoosmosis. All right, that's a chemical process of moving electrons over this membrane. Right? It's going to generate a whole bunch of ATP. And remember, ATP is just an energy carrying molecule that, if we look back at our note here, all I need to do is take those electrons from the electron transport chain, and I can use those electrons as energy to form this bond and generate ATP. All right. I know it's been a lot. There's a lot of chemical information there. You probably will have questions, but feel free to ask us. Have a great day.